Now, what's the solution to this problem? Well, some people commonly say, do a spell and forget it. That's a common phrase I've heard a lot of people say in pagan groups. Do a spell and forget it. In other words, do a working, and immediately when you're done, go do something entirely different. Do whatever it takes to get your mind off of it. Talk to friends, go to their house, hang out, do something. Go outside, whatever works for you. Do something that does not take your attention back to that. And essentially, make it as if it never happened, even though in the back of your mind, your subconscious knows it did. But take your conscious awareness from it. It doesn't matter if your subconscious is going to focus on it, because the ritual is rooted into your subconscious. Therefore, you have nothing to worry about. A lot of the symbolism, as I mentioned before, a lot of those things act on the subconscious more than the conscious mind. The conscious mind is focused on the working itself. So if you take your attention away from the working, then there's nothing to fear, even if your subconscious mind is focused on it, because the subconscious mind is ultimately what will help, accelerate the process of it manifesting, because it's that part of you that knows without having to know, if that makes sense. It's the part that knows without having to question that it worked. The conscious mind, a lot of the time, goes into fear based on previous beliefs and begins to think, well, no, maybe it won't work. The subconscious mind is trying to say, fuck you, it did work, I don't need to doubt. The subconscious mind is harder to hear. And so, what you can do to train yourself to do this, one thing I've often done, is immediately I'm done with the ritual, anything that I used, I usually move out of my direct line of sight. That's one thing I can do. That's one thing that you can do. A lot of the time I will also immediately listen to music that isn't related to what I did, in a sense. I mean, I know a lot of people like to listen to something that reminds them of what they just did. Oftentimes, like, you like to listen to music that fits your situation that you're in, whatever emotion you're feeling, things like that. Just listen to something completely irrelevant. Listen to something that is completely random, even just comedic. That's what I do a lot of the time. I'll listen to comedy and just take my mind off of anything that was completely serious a second ago. Now, I was talking about the fire element here. Fire burns greater with more air. In other words, give yourself the best thoughts imaginable. Give yourself the best confidence. Work, learn, study, be patient. If you're patient with your understanding, you can be patient with your manifestation. And like I said before, air is vital for fire's existence. If you do not have any intellect, if you do not have any patience, if you do not have any will, you cannot create a fire. That's all there is to that. So please keep this in mind. Now we move on to the element of water, which is actually, I would say, my favorite, but they're all sort of favorites to me. But so is fire. Anyway, water is a very, very interesting element. I say this not out of disrespect to any other element, as every element has its interesting aspect. But water is interesting in the sense that, for one thing, the human body is made of approximately around 60-70% water, something like that. Water acts on vibration, it responds to sound, it responds to light, it responds to temperature, obviously. It freezes, it evaporates. Water, in a sense, to me, is sort of like a liquid form of magic itself. It's a perfect example of how magic works. If you see the water as your will, and if you see it as being flowing smoothly or chaotically, then you can see this as a representation of your own life, of your own will, and how it's manifested itself. If you want to create a chaotic situation, or if you don't mean to, but you do anyways because perhaps you don't have enough air element balancing out the rest of you. In other words, you're not thinking clearly, and therefore your water will be chaotic. That water aspect of yourself will be chaotic. Now, water represents vitality, life, renewal, psychic ability, the subconscious, the primordial creation of life. It represents a primordial state, a very subconscious and lucid state. It has so many unique aspects that I honestly cannot even begin to describe right now, because it would take too long to do so. But water seems to always get everyone's attention, not just because we need it to survive, because it's just hypnotic by nature. It can be soothing. there's music made just solely because of the sound of water, to reflect and work with the sound of water, like meditation music. And I feel that there's a connection to water everyone has that they simply have forgotten about. They forget, get too caught up in the earth element, and water is their subconscious. Speaking of which, I need some